What if Lucifer had completely destroyed the Messiah's bloodline before Jesus was born? Because if the Messiah was supposed to come through a specific line of descent, and that line disappeared, then it wouldn't just change the history of Israel. It would change the entire course of human history. And if that happened, an even more disturbing possibility would emerge. Maybe many of the wars, murders, betrayals, and persecutions recorded in the Bible were not merely political conflicts. Maybe they were systematic attempts to destroy one specific family, one single bloodline. And if that bloodline vanished, then none of the promises made to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and David could ever be fulfilled. And this is where everything changes, because the Bible seems to reveal a silent battle stretching across thousands of years. A war whose objective was never to conquer territories. It was to prevent a birth. Welcome to Bibleverse, where we explore alternate biblical universes. This is, what if Lucifer destroyed the Messiah's bloodline? Most people read biblical genealogies as boring lists of names. But there is one detail that completely changes the perspective. From Genesis to the Gospels, the Bible insists over and over again on recording one specific family line, generation after generation, father to son, century after century. And that is strange, because if salvation depended solely on God, why devote so many chapters to preserving family records? The answer seems to be found in one of the oldest prophecies in all of Scripture. After the fall in Eden, God declares that the offspring of the woman would crush the serpent's head. And here a problem arises for Lucifer. The prophecy does not merely announce a future defeat. It also identifies the source from which that defeat will come. An offspring, a bloodline, a family. From that moment on, destroying that line becomes a strategic objective. And then the first unsettling possibility emerges. What would have happened if Lucifer had succeeded? To understand that, we must examine every moment when the bloodline came close to disappearing, because there are more of them than most people realize. Let's begin with Abraham. God promises that a nation will come from him, and that through his descendants, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. But there is one obvious problem. Abraham and Sarah could not have children. Entire decades pass without fulfillment. And here an uncomfortable theory emerges. What if Sarah's prolonged barrenness represented something more than a biological difficulty? What if the spiritual forces behind the rebellion were attempting to prevent the birth of the promised heir? Because the problem was never merely familial. It was prophetic. Without Isaac, the promise ended there. But Isaac is born, and the bloodline survives. Then comes Jacob, then Joseph, then the descent into Egypt. And this is where things begin to spiral out of control, because Pharaoh orders the mass killing of Hebrew boys. At first glance, it appears to be a political decision. Population control, national security. But when we look at the bigger picture, the situation becomes unsettling. The nation from which the Messiah was supposed to emerge was being attacked precisely in its ability to reproduce. And that completely changes this story, because the slaughter of children did not merely threaten individuals. It threatened future generations. It threatened the bloodline. Yet Israel survives. Then Moses appears. The nation is delivered, and the line continues. But there is an even more disturbing question. Why do the attacks intensify precisely when the prophecies become more specific? When God promises that the future king will come from Judah, the dangers seem to concentrate on that tribe. When it is later revealed that the Messiah will come from the house of David, the attacks seem directed toward that family. And here we encounter one of the most astonishing episodes in the entire Bible. After the deaths of several kings of Judah, a woman named Athaliah seizes power. Her decision is brutal. She orders the execution of all the royal descendants. All of them, not just a few. Not merely political rivals, every possible heir. And for a moment, it appears she succeeds. The dynasty of David stands on the brink of extinction. But one child survives, Joash. He is hidden away in secret. And because of that single survivor, the bloodline continues. Now imagine our alternate scenario. What if Athaliah had found Joash? What if no heir had survived? Immediately, an enormous problem emerges. The promise made to David would appear to be nullified. There would be no throne, no heir, no legitimate descendant. And then millions of people would begin questioning God's faithfulness. Because if that promise failed, other promises could fail as well. And this is where everything changes. Because confidence in the entire prophetic structure would begin to collapse. But there is a second path that is even more radical. Suppose David's line disappeared completely centuries before Jesus was born. Israel still exists. The prophets still write. The temple still functions. But there is no longer any possible candidate capable of fulfilling the messianic prophecies. And that creates an enormous crisis. Because the promised Messiah had to meet specific genealogical requirements. He had to belong to certain family lines. He had to descend from David. He had to fit within a concrete historical chain. Without it, any claimant would automatically be disqualified. And then another possibility emerges. Perhaps the most devastating consequence would not be political. It would be spiritual, because entire generations would begin to believe that God had abandoned his plan. The centuries would pass. Expectations would disappear. Messianic hope would slowly die. And when someone finally appeared claiming to have been sent by God, no one would have any reason to believe him. But there's a third scenario that is even more disturbing. What if Lucifer destroyed the bloodline after the prophecies had already been recorded? Because that would create an apparently impossible contradiction. The scriptures would announce a future descendant, but that descendant could no longer exist. And this is where things become truly dangerous. Because the attack would no longer be aimed merely at Israel. It would be aimed at the very credibility of God. If prophecy cannot be fulfilled, then confidence in all revelation becomes compromised. And if confidence disappears, faith collapses. And if faith collapses, the relationship between God and humanity changes completely. That is why many scholars have noticed a curious pattern. Every time the messianic line appears to approach danger, an unexpected preservation takes place. A hidden baby, an unknown survivor, an improbable intervention, a last-minute rescue. And that connects to something much greater. Perhaps biblical history is not merely the story of how God prepared for the arrival of the Messiah. Perhaps it is also the story of how that bloodline survived constant attempts at destruction. Visible and invisible attempts. Human and spiritual. Political and prophetic. Because when we view the Bible through this perspective, many events take on a different meaning. Genealogies cease to be lists of names. They become evidence of survival. Every generation represents a battle won. Every birth represents a threat frustrated. Every heir represents a prophecy still alive. And this is where the most unsettling conclusion of all appears. Perhaps Lucifer never needed to conquer the world. Perhaps he never needed to destroy all nations. Perhaps the objective had always been far more specific, to eliminate one single family line, because if he succeeded, the birth of the Messiah would become impossible. Without the Messiah, there would be no crucifixion. Without the crucifixion, there would be no redemption. Without redemption, humanity's spiritual history would be unrecognizable. But according to the biblical narrative, all of those attempts failed. The bloodline survived. The promise survived. And eventually, Jesus was born. The question is whether all those events were merely historical coincidences, or whether they truly formed part of a war far older than nations, empires, and kings. Now I want to know what you think. If Lucifer had managed to completely destroy the Messiah's bloodline, do you believe God would have created another way to fulfill his plan, or would human history have changed forever? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy alternate biblical universes that challenge the traditional way of understanding Scripture, subscribe to Bibleverse so you don't miss the next scenarios. Because one decision, just one decision, can change everything. Until next time.